The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, cold and indifferent. In this dark void, a small fleet of battered ships drifted aimlessly. Their hulls were scared, their energy reserves almost depleted, and their life support systems barely functioning. These were not warships nor traders. They were refugee vessels, filled with the last remnants of a dying civilization. The Trinari had once been a proud and advanced species. They lived in grand cities that floated above their homeworld's oceans, crafting wonders that had amazed even the oldest races in the galaxy. But now, their home was gone, their allies had betrayed them, and the universe had turned its back on them. Cyril Cawthon, the leader of the refugees, stood on the bridge of the largest ship, the Carasis. He was old, his once strong body weakened by months of hunger and exhaustion. His violet eyes, once full of wisdom, now held only sadness. Around him, his crew worked in silence, too tired to speak. They had sent out distress signals to every known species, but no one had answered. "Sir, we have only enough air for 3 more days," a young Trinari officer reported weakly. "After that, we won't have enough oxygen to keep everyone alive." Cyril nodded slowly. He already knew the truth, but hearing it spoken made it even heavier on his heart. The Trinari were not warriors. They had always believed in diplomacy and knowledge. Yet, when their enemies came, no one came to help. He placed a hand on the control panel and sighed. "Send another distress signal," he ordered. The officer hesitated. "But sir, no one will respond." "Perhaps," Cyril said, "but we must try." The message was simple. "We are the last of the Trinari. Our ships are failing. Our people are dying. If there is any kindness left in the stars, please help us." Once more, the signal was sent into the endless void. And once more, the Trinari waited as hope continued to slip away. A light in the darkness. Millions of kilometers away, the TSS Endeavour, a Terran patrol ship, was traveling near the outer edges of human-controlled space. Captain Elias Carter leaned back in his chair, sipping a cup of coffee. The ship had been on a routine patrol for weeks now, and so far, nothing interesting had happened. Then the distress signal appeared on the communication screen. The crew turned their heads as the message played. Lieutenant Sarah Reynolds frowned. "Another distress call. That's the 3rd one this week. Probably a pirate trap." Another officer muttered. "Happens all the time." Carter, however, remained silent. He listened to the voice in the message. It was tired, defeated. This was no trick. "Can we trace the source?" Carter asked. Reynolds nodded. "Yes, sir. It's coming from a small fleet on the edge of deep space. The ships are in terrible condition. If we don't move fast, they won't last much longer." The captain stared at the screen. Every logical part of his mind told him to ignore it. Earth's leaders had warned against getting involved in alien conflicts. Resources were limited, and the Terran Alliance had its own problems. But Carter was not the kind of man to let others suffer if he could help. "Set course," he ordered. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but no one argued. The Endeavour changed direction and sped toward the dying fleet. A last hope. Back on the Carasis, Cyril Cawthon sat in silence. The dim lights flickered, a reminder that their power supply was almost gone. Around him, Trinari children huddled next to their parents, too weak to cry. He had done everything he could. Now, all he could do was wait for the inevitable. Then, an alert. A new signal appeared on their sensors. A human voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the TSS Endeavour. We received your distress signal. Hold on. We're coming to help." For the first time in months, Cyril felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Cyril Cawthon gripped the edge of his chair, his heart pounding. He replayed the message in his mind, afraid that he had imagined it. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the TSS Endeavour. We received your distress signal. Hold on. We're coming to help." The bridge of the Carasis was silent. Every Trinary officer stared at the screen in disbelief. For months, they had called for help. For months, they had been ignored. And now, at their final moment, an answer had come, not from old allies, not from powerful empires, but from humans. "Sir, the signal is real," the communication officer confirmed, his voice shaking. "The ship is approaching fast. Estimated arrival in 10 minutes. Cyril inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself. "Open a channel," he said. A moment later, the screen flickered, and a human face appeared. A middle-aged man with sharp blue eyes and a firm, steady expression. He wore a dark uniform, and behind him, human officers worked at their stations. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the Endeavor," the man said. "Who am I speaking to?" Cyril straightened. "I am Cyril Cawthon, leader of the Trinary refugees." He hesitated before adding, "We did not expect anyone to answer." Carter nodded. "We almost didn't. But we're here now. What's your situation?" Cyril closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling the weight of his people's suffering. "Our ships are failing. Life support is weak. We have lost many already, and if help had not come, we would all be gone soon." Carter's jaw tightened. "Understood. We're preparing emergency supplies, oxygen, food, medical aid. But we won't be able to help from a distance. We're going to dock with your lead ship. Permission to board." Cyril hesitated. The Trinary had been betrayed before. Other species had promised aid, only to turn their backs when it mattered most. But they had no choice. "Permission granted," he said. The arrival of hope. Minutes later, a large human shuttle emerged from the Endeavor and approached the Carasis. Trinary crew members gathered at the docking bay, watching anxiously as the metal doors hissed open. A group of humans stepped forward, dressed in dark uniforms with medical bags slung over their shoulders. At the front was Captain Carter. The air was thick with silence as the two species stood face to face. The Trinary were tall, with slender frames and smooth violet skin. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The humans were shorter, stockier, their features hardened by years of survival in a dangerous galaxy. Cyril stepped forward. "Welcome aboard the Carasis, Captain Carter." Carter gave a small nod. "Let's get to work." His crew moved quickly, distributing oxygen canisters and medical supplies. Human doctors rushed to assist the weakest Trinary, checking their vitals, treating their wounds. Some Trinary flinched at first, so used to cruelty that kindness felt foreign. But as the minutes passed, a sense of relief washed over them. One human doctor knelt beside a Trinary child, offering a ration bar. The child hesitated, then took a bite. His tired eyes widened at the taste of real food. Cyril watched in amazement. This was no trick, no deception. These humans were genuinely helping them. The cost of kindness. As the aid continued, Carter and Cyril walked through the ship, surveying the damage. The Carasis was barely functional. Power reserves were dangerously low, and without repairs, the ship wouldn't last another week. "We can tow your fleet to safer space," Carter offered. "We have engineers who can help stabilize your systems." Cyril exhaled in relief. That would mean, we have a future. But before Carter could respond, his communicator beeped. He pressed a button, and a voice came through. "Captain, we have a problem. Earth Command is contacting us. They don't approve of this rescue mission." Carter's expression darkened. "Understood. I'm on my way." Cyril watched him carefully. "Your leaders do not want you to help us." Carter sighed. "Humanity has fought hard to secure its place in the galaxy. We don't have many allies. Taking in refugees could create problems with certain alien factions. So you must abandon us." Carter met his gaze. "I didn't say that." Defying orders. Back on the Endeavor, Carter stood before his officers, listening to the transmission from Earth Command. A strict-looking official appeared on the screen. "Captain Carter," the man said, "your orders were to patrol, not interfere in alien affairs. You are to disengage immediately." Carter clenched his fists. "These people are starving. If we leave them here, they will die." "That is not our concern," the official replied coldly. "Withdraw at once." Silence filled the room. His officers shifted uncomfortably, waiting for his response. Carter exhaled slowly. Then he straightened his uniform and spoke in a calm, steady voice. The transmission cut off. The room was silent. Carter turned to his crew. "We're staying. A new path forward." On the Carasis, Cyril stood by the viewport, watching the Endeavor in the distance. When Carter returned, Cyril met him with an unreadable expression. "You chose to help us," Cyril said, "even when your own people told you not to." Carter crossed his arms. "Yeah, that's what humans do." For the first time in a long while, Cyril smiled. Hope had truly arrived. The corridors of the Carasis were no longer silent. Where once there had been only whispers of despair, now there were voices. Trinary refugees murmuring in quiet hope, human medics giving instructions, engineers working to stabilize the ship's systems. The Trinary watched the humans move with urgency and efficiency, their actions driven not by orders or profit, but by something far rarer: kindness. Cyril Cathun stood beside Captain Elias Carter, observing the scene. The elder Trinary still struggled to understand the humans' motivations. His people had always believed in logic and diplomacy, yet both had failed them. But humans, they did what felt right, even when it made no sense. "Your people confuse me, Captain," Cyril admitted, his violet eyes studying Carter's face. "You go against your own leaders to help us. Why?" Carter glanced at the Trinary elder, then at the exhausted refugees around them. "Because it's the right thing to do." Cyril frowned. "The right thing." Carter sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Back on Earth, we have a saying. We don't abandon those in need. If we turn away now, what does that make us?" Cyril nodded slowly. "In this galaxy, it makes you different." The weight of gratitude. As the hours passed, the situation aboard the Carasis improved. Human engineers patched up failing systems, and medical officers distributed more aid. The refugees began to recover, their strength slowly returning. One of the Trinary children, a boy with large, tired eyes, hesitantly approached a human engineer who was fixing a broken power conduit. The child held out a small carved stone, likely the last personal belonging he had. The engineer, a burly man with grease-covered hands, looked surprised. "For me?" he asked. The child nodded. The engineer smiled and took the stone carefully. "Thanks, kid." He ruffled the boy's hair, and for the first time in months, the child laughed. Cyril watched this simple moment and felt something unfamiliar in his chest, something that had been missing for too long: a gathering storm. But even as hope grew, danger loomed. Back aboard the Endeavor, Carter's officers gathered around the communication console, listening to intercepted transmissions. Lieutenant Sarah Reynolds turned to Carter, concern in her eyes. "Sir, we just picked up a message from the Xelari Dominion. They know we've taken in the refugees." Carter tensed. The Xelari were one of the most powerful empires in the sector. They had once been allies of the Trinary, but when war came, they had abandoned them. Now the Xelari ruled through fear, and any species that disobeyed them suffered for it. "What does the message say?" Carter asked. "They're not happy," Reynolds said grimly. "They're calling this an unauthorized interference. They're demanding we hand over the refugees immediately." Carter narrowed his eyes. "Or what?" "They didn't say, but we both know what the Xelari do to those who defy them." Carter clenched his fists. The Endeavor was a strong ship, but it couldn't fight a Xelari fleet alone. And Earth's leaders had already refused to back this mission. They were on their own. Fear versus choice. Cyril stood quietly as Carter relayed the news. The Trinary elder closed his eyes. "It is as I feared. The galaxy still does not care about us. Even now, The Xilari demand our destruction. Carter shook his head. No, they just expect us to be afraid. And are you not? Cyril asked. Carter smirked. Fear's not the problem. The problem is what you do with it. He crossed his arms. I say we don't run. We stand. Cyril studied him. You would fight. For us? You think we came all this way just to hand you over? Carter said. Not happening. A long silence passed between them. Then, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Cyril felt something that wasn't fear, wasn't despair. It was trust. A decision made. Back on the Endeavor, Carter addressed his crew. We have two choices. We can give in and let the Xilari decide the fate of these people, or we make a stand and show them humanity doesn't abandon its friends. The crew exchanged looks. Then, one by one, they nodded. Reynolds smiled slightly. I guess we're making a stand. Carter turned back to Cyril. We're not leaving you behind. For the first time in months, Cyril felt something real. Hope was no longer just a wish. It was a promise. The silence of space was shattered by the arrival of the Xilari warships. They came in formation, sleek and menacing, their dark hulls reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. At the center of their fleet was the Voresh, a command cruiser far larger than the Endeavor. It was not just a warship, it was a message. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Captain Elias Carter stood with his arms crossed, his sharp blue eyes locked onto the approaching enemy ships. The Xilari had not fired yet, but their presence alone was a threat. Lieutenant Sarah Reynolds turned from her station. Sir, they're hailing us. Carter exhaled slowly. Put them through. The main screen flickered, and the face of High Commander Thalzor appeared. The Xilari leader was tall and reptilian, his emerald green scales gleaming under the cold light of his warship. His golden eyes studied Carter with calculated disdain. Captain Carter, Thalzor said in a smooth, measured tone, you have something that belongs to us. Carter's jaw tightened. I wasn't aware that people could belong to anyone. Thalzor's thin lips curled in amusement. The Trinari are fugitives. They violated their agreements with the Dominion, and their punishment was decided long ago. You have no authority to interfere. Carter held his ground. What I see are starving refugees who lost everything. And I see a group of cowards too afraid to finish what they started, so they left them to die. Thalzor's expression darkened. This is not your concern. Turn them over now, and we will allow you to leave in peace. Carter glanced at Cyril Cawthon, who stood beside him. The Trinari elder's face was calm, but his hands were clenched tightly together. Cyril took a deep breath and stepped forward. We are not fugitives, he said firmly. We are survivors, and for the first time in a long while, we have found those willing to help us. We will not go back to suffering under your rule. Thalzor's eyes narrowed. You misunderstand, Cyril Cawthon. You have no choice. Carter's voice was like steel. That's where you're wrong. Preparing for battle. The transmission cut off, and the Xilari ships began repositioning. It was clear what would happen next. Sir, Reynolds reported, they're locking weapons on us. Carter turned to his crew. Shields up. Battle stations. The bridge came alive with activity. Officers moved quickly, activating defenses, preparing for what was coming. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but Carter wasn't about to back down. Cyril watched, his mind racing. Captain, your ship is strong, but you cannot face them alone. Carter smirked. We're not alone. He opened a channel to the Trinari fleet. This is Captain Carter. We're about to get into a fight. Your ships might be damaged, but I need every pilot who can still fly to get ready. If you can move, you can help. For a moment, there was silence. The Trinari were not warriors. They had never been. But something had changed in them. One by one, voices answered. This is Pilot Renner. My fighter still works. I'll fight. I can still control the defense turrets. I'll cover you. For the first time in my life, I refuse to run. Carter's smile widened. That's what I like to hear. The first strike. The auxiliary struck first. Blue energy beams lanced through the void, hammering against the Endeavor's shields. The ship trembled, but held. Return fire, Carter commanded. The Endeavor's railguns roared to life, sending slugs of metal toward the enemy. Explosions rippled across one of the smaller auxiliary ships, forcing it to retreat. Meanwhile, the Trinary pilots, once desperate survivors, now weaved between enemy ships, dodging attacks and returning fire. Their vessels were old and worn, but they fought with a determination they had never felt before. Cyril watched the battle unfold. His people, once broken, once abandoned, were standing their ground. For the first time in history, the Trinary were fighting back. A dangerous gamble, but the Auxiliary were still stronger. The Vorash loomed ahead, charging its primary weapon. If it fired, the Endeavor would not survive. Carter knew they had only one chance. Reynolds, he called. Divert all remaining power to the main cannons. I want everything we've got focused on that cruiser. Reynolds hesitated. Captain, if we do that, we'll lose shields. Carter's eyes burned with determination. Then we better make this shot count. The order was given. The Endeavor's main railguns powered up, glowing with energy. The ship's shields flickered and died as all power was rerouted to the weapons. The auxiliary commander saw what was happening and gave the order to fire. At that moment, the Endeavor unleashed its full firepower. Two massive slugs of tungsten ripped through space at incredible speeds. The auxiliary ship fired its own weapon at the same time. For a brief, terrifying moment, silence reigned. Then, the Vorash's hull erupted in a brilliant explosion. The enemy ship was torn apart, its debris scattering into the void. The auxiliary fleet hesitated. Their flagship was gone. Their commander was gone. And the humans, they were still standing. One by one, the remaining auxiliary ships turned and fled. Victory and aftermath. The battlefield was quiet once more. The damaged but victorious fleet of humans and Trinary drifted together in the endless dark. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Carter exhaled and leaned back. Well, he muttered, that was fun. Cyril turned to him, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he bowed. You have done what no one else would. You saved us. Carter chuckled. I told you, we don't abandon people. For the first time, in a long, long while, Cyril believed it. Hope was no longer a fragile dream. It was a reality. The battlefield had fallen silent. The wreckage of the auxiliary warships drifted through the void, remnants of a battle that should have ended in the Trinary's destruction. But against all odds, they had survived. The humans had fought for them, something no other species had ever done. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Captain Elias Carter let out a slow breath. His ship was damaged, shields barely functioning, but they were alive. And more importantly, so were the Trinary. Lieutenant Sarah Reynolds checked the sensors. Sir, the remaining auxiliary ships have retreated. No signs of reinforcements. Carter nodded. Good, but they'll be back. Cyril Cathun stood beside him, his eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and uncertainty. His people had won their first battle, but victory alone wouldn't be enough. We cannot stay here, Cyril said. If the auxiliary return with a full fleet, neither of us will survive. Carter rubbed his chin. He knew Cyril was right. The Endeavor had taken too much damage to fight another battle, and the Trinary were still weak. Agreed, Carter said. We need a plan, a real one, a desperate escape. The Trinary ships, though repaired enough to function, were still in no condition for long travel. The Endeavor had enough supplies for a short journey, but they couldn't run forever. We need a safe place, Cyril said. Somewhere the auxiliary won't follow. Carter frowned. The auxiliary ruled over a vast region of space, and most nearby systems were under their control. But then he remembered something. An old station, abandoned for decades. There's a place, Carter said. A decommissioned human outpost on the edge of the sector. No one goes there anymore. It's off the charts, hidden from most star maps. Cyril's brow furrowed. Will it be safe? Carter gave a small smile. It's not perfect, but it's better than waiting here to be hunted down. With no better options, the decision was made. The Endeavor and the Trinary fleet prepared for departure. The humans worked alongside the refugees, fixing what they could, distributing rations, and helping the Trinary prepare for the long journey. Despite the exhaustion, there was something different in the air now, something that had not been there before. Hope, an unspoken gratitude. As they worked, a small Trinary girl approached one of the human engineers, the same one she had gifted a stone to earlier. She held out her hands, this time offering a small hand-woven bracelet. The engineer knelt down. For me. The girl nodded shyly. With a warm smile, the man took it, slipping it over his wrist. I'll wear it with pride. These small moments repeated across the ship, Trinary thanking humans in their own quiet ways, offering simple gifts, gestures, or even just words of gratitude. Cyril watched it all, feeling something deep in his chest. His people had been abandoned by the galaxy, but here, among humans, they were not alone. Carter approached him. Your people are strong, he said. Stronger than they think. Cyril nodded. They have never had a reason to fight before. You gave them that. Carter smirked. We just reminded them they had something worth fighting for. A race against time. With final preparations complete, the fleet made the jump to their destination. The journey was tense. Every moment, they feared Silari pursuit. Scanners swept for any signs of enemy ships, but the void remained quiet. Still, the tension never faded. After hours of travel, the outpost finally came into view. It was an old station, orbiting a lifeless moon, its metal surface scarred by time and neglect. Once, it had been a research station, but after funding was cut, it had been abandoned. Now, it would become something else. A sanctuary. The Endeavor and the Trinary ships docked carefully. The station was still functional, though it needed repairs. It wasn't a home, not yet, but it was a place to rest, to heal, to rebuild. A future uncertain. As the refugees settled in, Carter stood at the station's main control room, looking out into space. Cyril joined him. We made it, the elder said. Carter exhaled. For now. Cyril folded his hands together. The Xilari will come again. Carter nodded. Yes. And when they do, we'll be ready. Cyril studied the human captain, then smiled slightly. You truly believe that? Carter smirked. You saw what happened back there. We didn't just fight. We won. And we'll do it again if we have to. Cyril nodded. He had once thought the Trinary were a doomed people, destined to be forgotten. But now, standing beside these humans, these stubborn, fearless humans, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, their story wasn't over yet. Hope had survived, and with it, so had they. The abandoned station was slowly coming to life. Human engineers worked alongside Trinary technicians, fixing broken systems, sealing damaged corridors, and restoring power to darkened sections. The outpost was old, but its structure was still strong. With time, it could become a real home for the refugees. Cyril Kethun stood at the central control hub, watching as his people moved with a sense of purpose. For the first time in years, they weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were building something. Captain Elias Carter entered, his boots echoing against the metal floor. How's it looking? Cyril turned to him. Better than I expected. Your people work fast. Carter smirked. We don't like wasting time. Cyril nodded. He had come to admire the humans' efficiency, but more than that, he admired their spirit. They did not give up, no matter how bad things looked. That spirit had saved his people, and now it was giving them a future. But deep inside, Cyril knew their peace wouldn't last. A troubling discovery. Lieutenant Sarah Reynolds entered, her face tense. "Captain, we have a problem." Carter raised an eyebrow. "What kind of problem?" Reynolds placed a small device on the table. It was damaged, its casing cracked, but its purpose was clear. "A tracking beacon," she said grimly. Carter's expression darkened. "Where did you find it?" "One of the Trinary ships. It was hidden deep in the engine systems. Took our engineers a while to notice." Cyril's heart sank. "That means the auxiliary know where we are." Carter clenched his jaw. "And they're coming. Preparing for war." The room fell into silence. Finally, Cyril straightened. "We need to leave." Carter shook his head. "No. If we run now, they'll chase us, and we don't have the resources to keep running." Cyril hesitated. "Then what do we do?" Carter looked at Reynolds. "How long until they get here?" Reynolds checked her datapad. "Based on when the beacon was activated, we have less than a day." Carter nodded. "Then we make our stand." Cyril frowned. "Captain, my people are not warriors." Carter placed a hand on his shoulder. "They don't have to be. We'll handle the fight, but we'll need their help." Cyril took a deep breath. "Then tell us what to do." The calm before the storm. Preparations began immediately. The humans reinforced the station's defenses, setting up turrets and barricades at key entry points. The Trinary, though not trained for battle, worked hard, repairing broken systems, moving supplies, and assisting however they could. For the first time, they were not just waiting for doom to come. They were preparing to fight back. In one of the station's corridors, a young Trinary named Renner approached a human soldier. "Can you teach me?" he asked hesitantly. The soldier, a woman named Private Lee, studied him. "You ever fired a weapon before?" Renner shook his head. Lee handed him a small training rifle. "Then let's start." Similar moments played out across the station. The Trinary were afraid, but they no longer wanted to be helpless. And the humans? They had no intention of letting their new allies fall without a fight. The enemy arrives. Hours later, the sensors blared. "Incoming ships," Reynolds reported. "It's the auxiliary fleet." On the main screen, the enemy vessels came into view, sleek, deadly, and numerous. The auxiliary had brought more than before, enough to wipe out the station with ease. Cyril swallowed hard. "Can we hold them off?" Carter's eyes hardened. "We don't have a choice." The auxiliary hailed them. The face of a new commander appeared, tall, cold, and without mercy. "Humans," the commander sneered. "You have made a grave mistake. Surrender the Trinary, and we may let you live." Carter folded his arms. "Not happening." The auxiliary's eyes narrowed. "Then you will die with them." The transmission cut off. The enemy ships moved into attack formation. Carter turned to his crew. "This is it, people. We stand together. We fight together." Reynolds nodded. "And we win together." The alarms blared. The battle had begun. The first shot. The auxiliary fired first, their energy cannons lighting up the void. The Endeavor, still docked with the station, returned fire. Railguns thundered, tearing into the enemy ships. The station's newly repaired turrets came to life, sending volleys of plasma at the attackers. The auxiliary were relentless, hammering the station's defenses. Explosions shook the walls. The Trinary inside braced themselves, fear in their eyes. But they did not run. In one of the station's corridors, Renner clutched his rifle as Lee crouched beside him. "Remember what I taught you," she said. "Breathe. Aim. Fire." Renner swallowed his fear. The enemy was coming. He had to be ready. Hope burns bright. Despite their numbers, the auxiliary had not expected such fierce resistance. The humans fought with unmatched determination, and the Trinary, once helpless refugees, now stood beside them. Cyril watched the battle unfold. He had spent his life believing his people were weak. But now, seeing them fight back, seeing them refuse to bow to their oppressors, He realized the truth. They had never been weak. They had only been afraid. And now, thanks to the humans, that fear was gone. As the battle raged on, a thought entered his mind. Perhaps the Trinari were not just survivors. Perhaps they were something more. Something stronger. Something unstoppable. The fight was not over. But for the first time, Cyril believed they could win. And that belief was worth more than any weapon. The battle raged on. The Xilari warships fired relentlessly, their weapons scorching the hull of the station. The Endeavor fought back with everything it had, its railguns and missiles tearing through enemy ranks. But the Xilari were strong, their numbers overwhelming. Inside the station, explosions shook the walls. Emergency lights flickered as the Trinari and human defenders held their ground. In the corridors, barricades had been set up, where Trinari, once helpless refugees, now stood shoulder to shoulder with their human allies. Renner took a deep breath, gripping his rifle tightly. Lee crouched beside him, scanning the hallway ahead. "Stay calm," she whispered. "They're coming." Footsteps echoed through the metal corridors. Then the Xilari soldiers appeared, their sleek armor glowing under the emergency lights. The battle inside the station had begun. The fight for survival. The humans and Trinari fired first. Plasma bolts and bullets lit up the corridor. The Xilari charged forward, their energy shields absorbing the first few shots. But the defenders did not back down. Renner took aim, remembering Lee's words. He pulled the trigger. His shot hit a Xilari soldier, knocking them back. His heart pounded, but he did not stop. All around him, the Trinari fought. They were not warriors, but they fought for their people, for their survival. Cyril Cethun stood at the command center, watching the battle unfold on the station's monitors. He had spent his life believing his people were weak, but today he saw something different. They were strong. The humans had given them the courage to fight. Now, they were proving they deserved to survive. A captain's sacrifice. Outside, the Endeavor was struggling. The ship had taken heavy damage, its shields barely holding. Captain Elias Carter gritted his teeth as another explosion rocked the bridge. "Sir, our weapons are failing," Reynolds shouted. "We can't hold much longer." Carter clenched his fists. They needed to change the battle. "Reynolds," he said, his voice calm, "prepare the ramming protocol." The crew turned to him in shock. "Sir," Reynolds asked. Carter's expression was firm. "If we don't stop them now, the station falls. And if the station falls, the Trinari are finished." Reynolds swallowed hard. "Understood, sir." The Endeavor turned, its engines burning at full power. The Xilari commander saw the move too late. The Endeavor slammed into the largest Xilari warship, causing a massive explosion that tore through the enemy fleet. Fire and debris scattered into space. The Xilari ships, disoriented and damaged, began to fall apart. On the station, Cyril watched in horror. "No, Carter. Victory and loss." The Xilari fleet, without its command ship, began to retreat. The Trinari and humans cheered, but the victory was bittersweet. Carter was gone. Inside the station, the remaining Xilari forces, seeing their fleet in chaos, tried to flee. The defenders pressed forward, driving them out. Renner, still holding his rifle, realized something. They had won. The battle was over. The Trinari had survived. A new beginning. Days later, the station was quieter. Repairs had begun. The humans and Trinari worked together, not as allies, but as family. Cyril stood on the observation deck, looking out into space. The loss of Carter weighed heavily on him, but he knew what the captain had sacrificed for them. Reynolds approached him. "He believed in you," she said. "In all of you." Cyril nodded. "And we will honor him." He turned to his people, who were rebuilding their new home. They were no longer just refugees. They were survivors. They were free. And as long as they stood together, they would never be afraid again. The end.